Okay, gotta watch out. There's like 3 different wires over there. Okay, session 15, skill acquisition, written plans. I can't wait to see what this is. Dun, 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 dun. So there's only 8 slides, but slide 2 is review. Oh, I'm not going to review because we haven't gotten there yet. All right. Okay, so ABLES is one of the assessments that I could use when we first get a child approved for evaluation. I use VB-MAP. Has everybody seen the VB-MAP?
I've heard of this one.
The ABLES?
Mm-hmm.
This is what they did at our previous employer.
Yes.
They never trained me on it, and I had to kind of wing it.
No.
And so I didn't get a full knowledge of it. I learned most of it, like the basic of it, when I was in college, but because it was an online course, I didn't get a lot of hands-on. Pretty easy. The VB-MAP, I taught myself. I learned about it, and then it was cheaper to buy, because when I was independent, I had to purchase one of these to do an assessment. So the VB-MAP was cheaper than the ABLES. And the ABLES extends more, and it gets to a higher age level, goes to 5 or 6, and it breaks down each task. So basically, this would be like their scorebook. Kara and I, we decided to go iPad version, which is the best thing ever. So rather than buying a book for each child for me to take their data, I just do it on the iPad, and then it calculates the scores for me, and then it comes up with an IEP report, which helps on my 20-page reports I have to write for each child. So they are broken up. The VB-MAP is broken up into 3 levels. So level 1 is from 0 to 18 months developmentally, not chronologically, developmentally. Then level 2 is 18 to 30 months, and level 3 is 30 to 48 months. So it tops out at 4 years old. Now, most of our kids are in maybe a high level 1 or in level 2. All of our kids are preschool age, right? So they're 3 and 4 years old. Maybe 2 of our kids are in level 3. They're lower. But what it does, though, it breaks it down, and you have this is very similar to an ABLES. They just have different words, and it's a little different, but it's very similar. So that way you can see, but. So VB-MAP stands for verbal behavior acquisition, whatever. So you have manding, which we know is asking or protesting something when you're demanding for something. So it's like a command. Then it's going to assess your tacting level. How many pictures can they label? How many pictures do they know, like what these objects are? So tax 25 items. Tax a total of 200 nouns and or verbs. So it gets pretty concrete. And then we have listener responding. So, for example, selecting the correct item from an array of 6. So if you have 6 different pictures on the table, can they pick out the right one? If I say, give me water, they're going to give me the right item for 40 different objects. That's just one of the things.
Wow.
A higher one is select the correct item in a book, picture, scene, or natural environment when named for 250 items. So basically what I'd say is if they can get all of these, I can't physically test them on 250 things. I can't. I don't know how to do that. But if they can do following 2 component noun verbs, and so that is 100 right there, and performs 10 specific motor actions, that's 110. So I kind of just add it up, and then if I think that they can do more than what is already displayed, then I'll give them credit for that. But there's no way I can do 250. visual perceptual skills, and matching. So can they match things that are exact? Can they match things like a picture of an igloo and then a different picture of an igloo? Right now, a few of our kids have mastered those matching non-identical pictures, and they are on to matching a picture of something to the object. So it's a 2D to a 3D. So a lot of our kids are starting to get that skill, which is exciting because they're all starting to show some growth in that area. Independent play, they either got it or they don't, pretty much.
You had it.
I did. I had it. So assembles toys that have multiple parts for 5 different sets. So Mr. Potato Head, Little People, Connects, like a lot of our kids like the Magnetiles, so independent play. Or do they just walk around and hold the car? Right? Can they do something functionally with that toy? Social behavior and social play. So go figure, most of our kids score very low in this area. Being able to spontaneously ask a peer to participate in a game. Initiates a physical interaction with a peer. Spontaneously responds, like if a peer asks them to do something, do they answer back? Do they listen to them? Do they care? So these are really hard for our kids. I don't know why it's not. Oh, because my screen went blank. That's why. Okay. Motor imitation. We work, I know it sounds silly, like why do we have to have them act like us? Like why are we, jump, do this, and because we want their attention. If they can imitate us motorly, they have to be able to pay attention to us to learn how to do something. They can't draw an A if they don't watch how we do an A. So we need them to paying attention. So gross motor is huge because it's our whole body. And a lot of our kids can do fine motor, but not gross motor. Their body awareness isn't there. Let's see, the easier one for level 2 is imitates 10 actions that require selecting a specific object from an array. So I usually use like a cup and a spoon, a maraca, a car, whatever. So I have a bunch of different objects, and I want them to take their cup and the spoon and like make coffee or whatever, make hot chocolate. They need to stir their spoon in their cup. So then I tell them to do it, and I put my stuff back, and they have to take the spoon and the cup out of these arrays of things and do the same thing. So they have to copy. Echoic, literally, it is so silly. Let me see if I can find it in here. Echoic. So it starts with, they just have to go, like, okay, say what I say, ah, down to like ba, ba. And then there's tubby toy, puppet game. Then it gets a little harder and you have to do like the prosody. So no way, bugaboo. So you have to have like, they make it really obvious which one should be louder and which one should be quieter. And then you have, I love this one, the different pitch. So
Oh, that sounds like so much fun.
Loudness, they have to echo whispering. And then yelling. And then sustaining, like their duration. So, I need them to see if they can do it that one. Because anybody can go, ah. Well, not everyone. I shouldn't say that, because otherwise it wouldn't be an assessment. So that is the echoic part. And then you have listen responding by feature, function, and class. So they still have to listen to see what they're supposed to find, but then I'm specifically asking them to find something that has spots on it. I'm specifically asking them to find something that cuts the grass. I'm asking them to find a vehicle. So it's a feature, a function, class, I think, and then one of them, which one is it? I wonder if it's in a higher level. So you have to, so it's an array of 8 for 25 different fill in blanks. So you sit on a chair. We wash our hands with soap. We drive in a car. So those are your fill in the blanks. Introverbals, that's having a conversation. they can have a conversation back. So completes different song fill-ins like rockabye, and then they need to say baby. Ready, set, go. Provides their first name when asked, what's your name? Or what's your first name? So one of the kids I work with, I'm working on, he knows his name. I ask him, what's your first name? And then he tells me his last name. Nope. So what do I do? So pretend you're the person, but say your last. So you're gonna say your last name. What's your first name?
DeHaven Harpster.
Brett. What's your first name? Brett.
Okay, Brett.
So I'm gonna interrupt her, and I'm gonna have you. Brett. What's your first name?
DeHaven
Brett.
Am I
Brett.
supposed to keep
Your
saying?
first name's Brett. What's your first name?
Brett.
Brett. Good job. So I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna have errorless learning. If I see that she's not going on the buh, I'm gonna interrupt her. I'm gonna say the right word, and then I'm gonna say your first name is Brett. What's your first name? And we're gonna keep doing it, and doing it, and doing it, and doing it over and over and over.
Always the last name? This child?
Yes, because he knows, because he was taught. Because
That's
the maintenance failed.
Mm.
He learned his last name. He learned his name. What's your name? And he said his whole name. Then they broke it down to what's your last name and said his last name. So now all he's saying is his last name. Well,
Because that was the last thing that he learned. Okay.
So we're working on first name now. But on maintenance check yesterday, he got his phone number and address correct. I was so happy. So happy. We have not lost that maintenance. And then I told Jack that blah, blah, blah knows his address, and you know your address, but he knows his phone number, and you don't. So it's time to learn your phone number.
Does he have a home phone?
No, but we use his mom's cell number. So Jack's like, I'm going to learn my, okay. Then he started
Make it a
getting
competition.
but then he mixed them up. Somehow he must have overheard Dad's first three digits.
Oh.
So he's like 440-554. And I went, nope, that's Dad's. Because Dad has 330-554. And I have
330.
Because he's in Kent. It was a Kent number.
Weird.
Yeah. So anyway, I divert. Classroom routines and group skills. So sits in a group snack or lunch table without any negative behavior for 3 minutes.
What's that called?
Classroom routines and group skills. Sits in a small group for 10 minutes, attends to the teacher or materials for 50% of the time, and responds to 5 of the teacher's SDs or questions or whatever she's doing. Linguistic structure. So, I'm trying to think. We have some new kids coming in that have a lot of linguistics, but aren't able to use that into a conversation. So they have the language, it's there, but processing it and using it appropriately in an interverbal conversation or socially appropriate is where we're going to really have to work on, because the child's articulation can be understood. They have a listener vocabulary of 100 or more words. And they have a speaker vocabulary of 300 words or more. Like they got it. Like they have different rhythm and stress. So they like, no thanks, right? Like they know how to use different volume and pitch and the right mine. Like, this is mine. No. So they know when to use their words.
Would that be like John? You remember John? You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. How like when he was. When Asperger's was a thing, remember, like he had all kinds of language, but he only used it.
Right.
Would that be sort of an example?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you have a lot of language, it's built in there, but you're not using it correctly. Right. With another person.
Right. To communicate.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Gotcha.
So this is like the manual, and then after you do the assessment, it gives you all your reasoning.
I want to see that.
It's always on my desk. You are always welcome.
I'm
I just have to have it
going to.
here so that I can, when I do my assessments. So we're going to see the ABLES version of it. So it's a little different, but, and it's more expensive and more materials. The VB map, so everything, I mean, I've pretty much made all of my materials for it or collected or borrowed Jack's stuff.
Which one is more common?
is a tricky question.
I feel like I've seen that one more, but that one has given me PTSD.
They're probably the same. It's either or. You can do either or. I also think it depends on what your clientele is. So if you're going to have kids that are higher than developmentally like 4, then you would want to use the ABLES because it does extend a little bit higher, so you're going to get more of what to do next. Me personally, I don't feel I need that because my undergrad is early childhood education. So past 4, I know what they need, just education-wise. So that's why it worked. It was, rather than buying something that was more expensive, we decided let's do the VB map. You know how to use it. It's easy to go. So let's see. Assessment results are used to establish skill acquisition goals for each child. Examines in 4 areas. So basic learner skills, academic skills, self-help skills, and motor skills.
So that compared to the VB map assesses a lot more stuff, right?
Honestly, so they have their 4 areas, but they have little tiny domains underneath each one.
So all these things that I wrote down on the VB map, they're all
it's
part of
all, yeah.
I'm going to have to
they are, I mean, they're literally,
right.
They're so close. They're so similar. You can match it up almost identically.
Match.
This is a presentation on the Assessment of Basic Language and Learning Skills Revised, also known as the ABLES, which is an update to the ABLES that was published in 1998. And also a short review of the Assessment of Functional Living Skills, also known as the AFLS. This is the ABLES Revised. The ABLES is an assessment tool, curriculum guide, and skills tracking system that can be used to help guide the instruction of language and critical learning skills. The ABLES contains a task analysis of the skills that are necessary for communication and learning from everyday experiences. The overall goal of the ABLES is to refine the level of examination of skills so that teaching can occur in increments that are manageable and likely to result in meaningful and permanent gains for the learner. Therefore, each of the skills in the assessment is operationally defined with identified measurable increments. The ABLES is for children on the autism spectrum and those who have been diagnosed with other developmental disabilities which affect communication and learning skills. While parents are always asked to seek input from qualified professionals regarding all programming decisions regarding their child's educational services, the assessment gives criterion-referenced information regarding current skills and provides a curriculum that can serve as the basis for the selection of educational objectives which should be used by professionals for programming. One does not need to become certified to administer the assessment. However, without an understanding of the behavioral principles underlying the ABLES, the results may be less accurate and informative. The assessor should be someone who is likely to be objective about the learner and their abilities, and also someone who has had experience with children who have language delays and other maladaptive behaviors commonly associated with autism spectrum disorders. Many parents of children on the autism spectrum look for a tool to help guide them at home to help with the carryover of language and learning skills at home, which would be one of the main reasons why a parent may want to administer this assessment. Also, many children with autism often display a set of skills at school but not at home. Therefore, parents of learners with autism oftentimes look for a way to track progress at home to compare to progress in school. Dr. James Partington, the Director of Behavior Analysts Incorporated, is the creator of the ABLES. Dr. Partington has dedicated his life to helping children with autism spectrum disorders and other developmental delays for the past 35 years. His expertise is in language-based intervention and helping children develop the basic language and learning skills they need for everyday interactions. Dr. Partington developed the ABLES and pioneered the inclusion of verbal behavior into applied behavior analysis in doing so. B.F. Skinner defines verbal behavior as behavior that is reinforced through the mediation of other people. Applied behavior analysis, also known as ABA, is a systematic approach to applying interventions to improve socially significant behavior. The ABLES Revised is made up of two separate documents, the ABLES Protocol and the ABLES Guide. The ABLES Protocol provides a list of skills, though it does not include a method to readily determine the educational priorities for an individual child, and it does not include the steps necessary to teach those skills. The ABLES Protocol provides parents and professionals with criterion-referenced information regarding a child's current set of skills that can serve as a basis for the selection of educational objectives. The protocol also includes a set of scoring grids that makes it possible to observe and document the learner's progress in the acquisition of the skills. The protocol should not be used without the guide, and instructions for the use of the ABLES protocol are provided in the ABLES Guide as well. The ABLES examines 25 categories of behavior across 4 skill sets. The skill sets include basic learner skills, academic skills, self-help skills, and motor skills. These are skill sets in which learners with autism have a greater need for support. The basic learner skills section assesses the categories of cooperation and reinforcer effectiveness, visual performance, receptive language, imitation, vocal imitation, requests, labeling, intraverbals, spontaneous vocalizations, syntax and grammar, play and leisure, social interaction, group instruction, follow classroom routines, and generalized responding. The letters assigned to each category in the skill sets booklet correspond to the scoring grid, which we will take a look at later in the presentation. The academic skills section assesses the categories of reading skills, math skills, writing skills, and spelling. The self-help skills section assesses categories of dressing skills, eating skills, grooming, and toileting skills. And the
wait.
Assesses the categories of reading skills, math skills, writing skills, and spelling.
We assess toileting. And, eating kind of by can they sit at the table without any negative behavior. So these are more of your self-help areas that it will assess. Can they button pants? So in lieu of that, since I don't assess that part, what I do is this is for the older ones, but that might not be good enough. When parents come in and I'm assessing their child, I give their parents 2 different rating forms that they have to fill out in that hour period that I'm watching they're doing work with their kid. And one of the things is self-care. So I'm still getting an idea if they can, what their dressing skill is. One of them is uses bathroom without help, dresses himself, buttons own clothing, tells them when. So I'm still assessing it, but in this form rather than through the ABLES. That way I'm still getting an idea of what's going on.
The self-help skills section assesses categories of dressing skills, eating skills, grooming, and toileting skills. And the motor skills section assesses the categories of gross motor skills and fine motor skills.
The writing. It's under the writing specifically rather than a motor skill. Because there's not a motor, because it's verbal behavior, it's language, rather than everything. So with our kids, for the writing, it imitates 5 different writing actions, independently traces within a quarter inch of 5 different shapes, copies 10 letters or numbers, legibly spells and writes his name without copying, and copies all 26 upper and lowercase letters legibly. So that's under the writing. So I'm not sure what the writing is. If that is a fine motor, if our writing is under fine motor, I'm not sure what the difference is. They're clearly doing something else.
Why are our kids good with fine motor, but not exactly so much the gross motor? Why is
with the
that?
imitation?
What you...
Like, for example, with our little guy, he can do a lot of fine motor imitation.
Stacking and...
Right?
Yeah.
So he can clap his hands, he can touch his nose, he can do all that. When I told him to touch his hips, shake his hips, touch his belly, or just pat his thighs, couldn't find them.
Is that proprioceptive?
He doesn't know where his bodies are. His whole body is missing. So it's like, hey, well, we got to back it up and we got to label these. He doesn't know what these body parts are, so he can't imitate because he has no idea where his hips are. Maybe because he doesn't really have any hips. I don't know.
That's crazy.
So and that's what I noticed, like with a lot of our kids, they just they can't gross motor. They can't jump up and down because there's just their muscles are just all over the place. They're like one of those balloon guys, right?
Like you waving inflatable flailing arm tube man?
Right.
Yeah.
This is an skills and fine motor skills. This is an example of a list of skills in the labeling category within the basic learning skills set section of the ABLES protocol. Looking from left to right at the top of the table, you can see each task has a code. The code begins with the letter assigned to the category. In this case, the labeling category is the letter G, which corresponds to the letter G found on the scoring grid. Still looking from left to right at the top of the table, you will then see the scoring range, the task name, the task objective, the question the assessor should ask themselves during assessment, an example of the objective, the scoring criteria, and any notes for scoring the assessor should be aware of. The hierarchy of the ABLES is simpler to more complex skills, which indicates that earlier skills within each category are prerequisites for the independent and maintained demonstration of the skills by the learner later in the categories. This has a practical impact on the use of the ABLES in that gaps in skills that occur earlier in each category typically are given higher priority in the writing of initial goals for the child's treatment program. Learners with autism are often scattered in their abilities, and it's likely that when administering this assessment, the assessor may find that, for example, the learner may have the highest score, which is a 4, task G19, but may score a 1 on task G14. We will see an example of this on the next slide.
Okay, so let's look. So we have let's pick a small one. Student will be able to label items when only told the feature of the item. So this item has, like, let's say I have a bunch of different animals on there, on the table. This animal has wings, right? It's a feature. So in the presence of items or pictures of items, the student label the items only when told the feature. The examples, when shown pictures of a scissors, a shoe, a horse, and told it has a tail, or it has legs, the student should say horse. So then we has 4 labels 25 items. So it breaks it down that way. 3, 10 items, 2 is 5 items, and 1 is 2 items. So it breaks it down that way. Where we still break it down, this is either a 0, a half a point, or 1. Like, that's it. Either or.
For scoring the assessor should be aware of. The hierarchy of the ABLES is simpler to more complex skills, which indicates that earlier skills within each category are prerequisites for the independent and maintained demonstration of the skills by the learner later in the categories. This has a practical impact on the use of the ABLES in that gaps in skills that occur earlier in each category typically are given higher priority in the writing of initial goals for the child's treatment program. Learners with autism are often scattered in their abilities, and it's likely that when administering this assessment, the assessor may find that, for example, the learner may have the highest score, which is a 4, task G19, but may score a 1 on task G14. We will see an example of this on the next slide. This is an example of the scoring grid for categories A through I. You will see that at the top of the scoring grid, the assessor records the student's name, his or her own initials, the date assessed. Since the assessment takes more than a day, you may record the month and year the assessment took place if that is okay with your institution, if you are a professional with an institution, and the color code you will be using when you complete the assessment at that time, so the assessors and dates are clearly differentiated. This assessment should be given at least once a year or when professionals programming for a learner change. So skill acquisition for each year assessor is visible, and it is apparent what skills should.
So you have two different colors so that you can see different assessment days.
Oh, look at her.
So the yellow was the first time I assessed her,
Hmm.
and then the blue is the reassessment I just did with her. Yep. So you can see that she's made some growth. So this is what theirs looks like. It has all these stupid little boxes everywhere.
Those in?
Yes, and you hand color them in.
Oh my god.
Differentiated.
I don't.
This assessment should be given at least
Yeah,
once
you
a year
would need to
or when
color those
professionals
in.
programming for a learner change. So skill acquisition for each year assessor is visible,
But we use the
and it is
iPad,
apparent
so it
what skills should
automatically
be
colors it
targeted
in
next.
for us. So here's what
This-
theirs would look like. That doesn't, I don't know. But that's how many little teeny tiny assessments they have. All those teeny tiny little boxes are all different components of their test.
This is an example of a
Very
student's
nitty-gritty.
completed scoring grid across 4 years and various professionals. The name of the student has been blacked out to protect his or her identity. This learner has autism and is currently 9 years old. Therefore, this scoring grid shows the learner's progress since he or she was 5 years old. You can clearly see an example of scattered skills in categories G and H. This assessment informed the professionals programming for this learner where they needed to fill skill acquisition gaps. This assessment informed the professionals of objectives that should be targeted on the learner's individualized education plan.
I wish I could see.
Again,
Okay,
the
so this
ABLES
is
assists
receptive.
in guiding curriculum
So
and
this
tracking skills.
is expressing. Receptive is like answering something like yes, no's. Expressive is how can I explain this one? Expressive is more like expression. They're vocally saying it, and receptive is nodding their head. They can nod their head or reply.
The ABLES. This is an example of a student's completed scoring grid across 4 years and various professionals. The name of the student has been blacked out to protect his or her identity. This learner has autism and is currently 9 years old. Therefore, this scoring grid shows the learner's progress since he or she was 5 years old. You can clearly see an example of scattered skills in categories G and H. This assessment informed the professionals programming for this learner where they needed to fill skill acquisition gaps. This assessment informed the professionals of objectives that should be targeted on the learner's individualized education plan. Again, the ABLES assists in guiding curriculum and tracking skills. The ABLES guide provides instructions for scoring and completing the skills tracking grids. It also provides strategies to assist parents, educators, and other professionals to use the information obtained from the completed assessment protocol to develop an effective IEP for a learner. It also provides strategies for analyzing the scores to determine educational priorities and to help with the selection of educational objectives for an individual child. The R in ABLES R stands for revised. ABLES revised protocols and guide includes many new task items that were not originally included in the 1998 version. There have been multiple changes in the descriptions and criterion for individual task items as well as in the sequencing of many task items. The word new in the note section of a task indicates that the task has been added to the list of skills. Modified in the note section of a task implies that there have been changes made to the criteria, objective, question, or examples related to the task. The ABLES may take up to 14 hours total to complete. Since the school day does not always go exactly the way we expect it to, in my experience, I have found the ABLES may take up to 2 or 3 weeks of school to complete, depending on the learner's attention and behavior. The ABLES protocol.
The protocol and the guide. So this was, they said $65. I must have gotten mine for a little less than that because I thought mine was about that. So I'm not sure.
Why
Not really sure, but I thought mine was about $65. But then you have the whole kit. So it includes all the pictures, all the objects, all the stuff, and you can get it for $1,500. Or you can find Google images and print them and laminate them and then find random toys and it's the same thing. Or the Web Ables, which is what Sarah does, on her own pays $100 per student and then 60 years for each student for the renewal to keep their able so it tracks them. $100.
How could she do that if she's an BCA?
Because you don't have to have any, you don't have, a parent could buy it,
Oh. Okay. Wow.
right? But why was she buying it for her?
The ABLES protocol and guide set costs $64.95. The entire assessment kit, which includes all materials you would need to go with the protocol and guide, costs $1,495. And the electronic web version of the ABLES, which allows for electronic scoring and sharing information with team members, costs $100 for new users per student profile, and then costs $60 per student profile each additional year after. The ABLES language skills are assessed based upon the behavioral analysis of language as presented by Dr. B.F. Skinner in his book Verbal Behavior from 1957. The ABLES is not a diagnostic device. It does not compare the child to norms or the performance of other children. The ABLES looks at fundamental skills in a simplest to more complex hierarchical sense. It breaks those skills down into components in order to facilitate the development of specific interventions. The interventions are designed to scaffold upon abilities already acquired by the child in order to increase their repertoire of skills. The ABLES should be administered with 1-to-1 student-to-assessor ratio. Peers should be accessed when assessing social interactions, play, or any other category where interaction needs to be assessed. If tasks can be assessed during natural occurrences, the assessor may observe and record scores in an appropriate time. From personal experience, I go through the protocol in order, starting with the basic skills section. If I know I'm going to have the opportunity to observe the student completing or attempting to complete a task at a particular time that day or week, dressing, eating, fine motor, or interactions with others, I will hold off until then to obtain a score. That may mean that I am skipping around the skill sets booklets, but that's okay as long as each category is scored. The materials needed for the ABLES are the protocol and guidebooks. A complete list of the numerous materials needed to assess can be found at www.shop.vbteachingtools.com. Most schools that use the ABLES have purchased the entire assessment kit, which includes all materials needed. The assessment of functional life skills is the partner assessment to the ABLES, also created by Dr. Partington in addition to Dr. Michael Mueller. The AFLS is comprised of the AFLS Guide and Assessment Protocols, which assess functional skills of everyday life, practical skills of everyday life, and essential skills of everyday life. It is an extended assessment that exists spanning throughout a learner's life in home, school, and community settings, which is also a criterion-referenced assessment and does not require certification to administer. Like the AFLS is comprised of skill sets with categories for assessment. The AFLS assesses functional, practical, and essential skills for everyday life. Each module is connected by unifying themes and overarching goals for maximizing a learner's independent opportunities. Bundle multiple modules and customize the perfect assessment for your setting and situation. The original AFLS set includes basic living skills, home skills, and community participation skills. The school's skills protocol is sold separately. Guides and protocols range from $75 to $105, depending on the module. The Basic Living Skills module contains tasks for assessment in the following categories: self-management, basic communication, dressing, toileting, grooming, bathing, health, safety, and first aid, and nighttime routines. The Home Skills module contains tasks for assessment in the following categories: meals at home, dishes, clothing and laundry, housekeeping and chores, household mechanics, leisure, kitchen, and cooking. The school skills module contains tasks for assessment in the following categories: classroom mechanics, routines and expectations, meals at school, social skills, technology, common knowledge, core academics, and applied academics. The community participation skills module contains tasks for assessment in the following categories: basic mobility, community knowledge, shopping, meals in public, money, phone, time, social awareness, and manners. This is an example of a list of skills in the self-management category within the basic living skills module of the AFLS protocol. Looking from left to right at the top of the table, you can see each task has a code. The code begins with the letter assigned to the category. In this case, the self-management category are the letters SM, which corresponds to the letters SM found on the scoring grid. Still looking from left to right at the top of the table, you will then see the scoring range, the task name, the task objective, the question the assessor should ask themselves during assessment, an example of the objective, the scoring criteria, and any notes for scoring the assessor should be aware of. The hierarchy of the AFLS is also simpler to more complex skills, just like the ABLS, which indicates that earlier skills within each category are prerequisites for the independent and maintained demonstration of the skills by the learner later in the categories. This is an example of the scoring grid and scores for some categories in the AFLS module. You will see that at the top of the scoring grid, the assessor records the student's name, his or her own initials name, the date assessed. Since the assessment takes more than a day, you may record the month and year the assessment took place if that is okay with the school in which you teach, and the color code you will be using when you complete the assessment at that time, so the assessors and dates are clearly differentiated. This assessment should be given at least once a year or when professionals programming for a learner change. So skill acquisition for each year assessor is visible, and it is apparent what skills should be targeted next. This assessment could also take 2 to 3 weeks to complete. Limitations of the ABLS and AFLS may be the time it takes to administer the assessment, the numerous manipulatives needed to assess, and the fact that the learner essentially competes with oneself to master out objectives. In conclusion, these assessments are only as useful as the accuracy of the information that went into completing them, and the skill of the assessor in both completion and sorting through the potential skill targets for future goals and objectives. These assessments are useful if accurate information goes into completing the assessments, appropriate amount of time is given to assessing, assessor and instructor realistically assess and implement recommendations for each individual based on outcomes.
Okay, here we go.
There we go.
All right. Essential components of a skills acquisition plan. So you have to identify the skills to be taught, determine the target for proficiency. So our target here, target criterion, 80% or above for 3 consecutive days across 2 people. For targets 1 through 7. Oh, because then target 8 is a peer. That's why. Then 0 prompts for 3 consecutive, with 3 prompts for 3 consecutive days across 2 people for targets 8 through 10. That's with a peer. So that's your target. Criteria, which way I just did, sorry. Whatever. Responses. Criteria. Okay, got them.
Wait, what was the established criteria?
I think so.
Yes.
I didn't get any of them.
Skills to be taught, determine target for proficiency, and establish criteria for skill mastery. So we identified ball play is going to be a skill. The target for proficiency, he needs to roll the ball in the duration, in reciprocal ball play with a peer or instructor for a duration of 3 minutes. Then the criteria is 80% or above for 3 consecutive days across 2 people. So that was the criteria. Okay, so this is a skill acquisition plan. However, we spent money to buy the skill acquisition program. It's the, that way I don't have to come up with this all on my own. Because I can't even, this is hard enough going through these books and deciding which ones are appropriate for them. Because this one is for developmentally 1 through 4. So most of our kids, their programs come out of this book. And then some of them come out of this. It's 3 through 5. So that's where their programmings come from.
By picking up the card, so Haley only scores that as a touch prompt. Because Cameron needed prompting, Haley then does a correction trial. On the correction trial, she gestures to the orange card and Cameron picks it up. So she would score a T, then a slash, and a G for gesture. Now let's watch one final clip and record the data again for the SD Give Me Orange.
That's it. Give me orange.
Orange.
You had it right.
Orange.
Orange. Give me orange. Put it in my hand. Thank you.
What you saw in this video was Haley giving the SD, Give Me Orange, with a red distractor card out. Cameron reaches for the red, so Haley quickly gestures to the orange. He then gives her the card. So she would score a G for gesture.
You mean?
Gestural.
What does T/G mean?
So this is broken up is in the first trial.
Oh.
So a lot of, I've seen therapy companies already have it drawn in a box, drawn a line across, so they don't have to put the line there. So it's each box is broken into 2. So it's if they got it, if they missed it on the first time, then what kind of prompt did you give them? Like they missed it, like it was, I don't know, and then they did a correction trial with a gesture.
She yet again does a correction trial. On the correction trial, Cameron needs another gesture prompt to get the skill correct. So she would draw a hash mark and record a G for gesture. So now let's calculate the total % accurate or performed independently. Haley asked the skill 4 times, so there were 4 trials. Of those 4 trials, Cameron did not get any independently. So she would say 0 out of 4 were performed independently. Therefore, that would be 0%. Haley would then go to the graph, enter the date, May 14th, enter the total number of trials attempted, which was 4. She would not circle it since Cameron did not get the first trial independent. And she would put her data point at 0. She would then draw a line between the data point on April 30th and the new data point on May 14th.
Okay, so our graphing is going to be similar, but not really. So it has 2 graphs on one page for each program. So on here you have your date, and then your initials, and then what percentage they got, and then you connect it to whatever the person before you had. So you'll end up looking like...
Don't show mine.
Let's
It's the easiest thing to do.
I'll do
I'm behind you.
a ranch. No, because his is graphed.
Is this something you'd want us to do for at home therapy too?
Yeah. It'll be in his binder. So here's their binder. Here's his binder. And inside is all the... hold off on that because we're getting rain tree, which is the... it will be moving away from the paper.
Is that
In theory.
I was supposed to be trained on it this past Tuesday. They rescheduled like an hour before our training was supposed to start. So I'm getting trained again this Tuesday, but then I need to put these into Ranger. So then if you are here working, I think it will be used on a Chromebook. If you are at home, you'll just download the app.
It'll be so much easier.
Yeah.
Once you have all the data.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not going to use the binders anymore?
Nope. But it's going to take a couple weeks because I have to put everything in. So I'm going to try and do it as fast as possible. But it's going to take time. So, but basically, this is what the graph looks like once, if for God forbid we ever have to go back. But so they have they graph it. So then we can see when he does hit. So he hit 80%. Well, that's great, but he didn't hit 80% 3 different days. And then I can look at, when I'm looking at these two, I can look at, okay, well, here's point 1. Now I need to make sure it's across 3 days with 2 different people to make sure that it's actually mastered. And then if it is mastered, then I write that the data was mastered, and then we go to the next target. So the graphing definitely, because if you're just looking at a data sheet or data sheet after data sheet, they all look the same. This at least is easy to read. You can look at it very easily and say, this is what happened today on this day. That's why it's really important to try to get as many trials as possible, at least 5, because you're going to get a more accurate. So 5 to 10 is preferred, because if you're only doing 4 and he gets 1, then it's 25%. But if you get 1 out of 10, that's 10%. That's a difference. Or even if you get 4 out of 5, that's 80%. But if you get 4 out of 10, that's 40%. That's a difference. You're either mastering it or you're not.
Then draw a line. Haley would then go to the graph, enter the date, May 14th, enter the total number of trials attempted, which was 4. She would not circle it since Cameron did not get the first trial independent. And she would put her data point at 0. She would then draw a line between the data point on April 30th and the new data point on May 14th. In summary, you'll have curriculum developed from the ABLES-R. Each of these areas will have a program sheet. That program sheet will detail how to teach and what to teach. From that program sheet, those targets go on a daily all trials data sheet. This all trials data sheet is your lesson plan during the discrete trial session. You'll then calculate a total percentage of accuracy for each target and plot that on the graph. When the student demonstrates mastery on a specific target, that target would then be moved to a maintenance schedule. Initially, that schedule would be probing once a week, and then once they've demonstrated that they are maintaining the skill, you would move that target to a maintenance B schedule. All of this data collection ensures that the time we're spending within a discrete trial session is well used and the student is actually learning what we're teaching. And if they are not, we need to use that data to evaluate how we're teaching and what changes need to be made to our program.
Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Jennifer Price and I'm a student at Mohawk College finishing the Autism Behavioral Sciences Graduate Certificate Program. Today I'll be presenting my final written program. It is a skill acquisition program based on the assessment of basic language and learning skills, which I will be calling ABLES. The program is based on the ABLES task in the G domain, task G23, called Labeling by Indicating Yes or No. The client with whom I worked, we'll call him Tommy, is a 6-year-old male with autism spectrum disorder. He began attending Lansdowne Children's Center in November 2013, where he attends for IBI 20 hours a week. He also attends school 2 days a week. He lives with both parents and has 2 older sisters. Tommy has the ability to speak words, but he has little functional language. He does not initiate conversation and often scripts or has one-sided conversations that are sometimes from a TV show, movie, or something someone else has said recently. He uses others primarily as a tool to get what he needs and wants, although he is making some progress in manding, both for reinforcers and sometimes for other items. Tommy does not show items of interest to others, nor demonstrate independent joint attention. Tommy does not engage in simple social games such as rolling a ball to a peer or offer comfort to his peers. Tommy shows many difficulties in adjusting his behavior to suit a social context. He frequently leaves the table during instruction as well as at snack or lunch and will often flop on the floor or cry loudly in any setting, either to avoid a task, gain access to a reinforcer, or for attention. Tommy has difficulty in making friends and has little interest in his peers, as he would prefer to engage in solitary activities. He frequently does not respond to his name when called, turn toward a speaker, or make eye contact. Tommy has many repetitive patterns of behavior, including hand flapping when excited or engaged in a visual stim, toe walking, body tensing, and face grimacing. He also has a very intense preoccupation with opening and closing doors, and occasionally turning lights on and off. His door fascination appears to be a sensory-seeking behavior. He also appears to be sensory-seeking when watching wheels turn on tricycles or a wagon in the gym, as he frequently gets close and watches them spinning very closely and hand flaps while doing so. He occasionally appears to be hypersensitive to loud noises, such as students in other treatment rooms or other unexpected loud noises. He also exhibits an unexpected response to certain auditory input. He becomes very upset and may aggress if anyone around him sings. Tommy does have a fixation with Thomas the Train, Angry Birds, and Henry the Hand. Despite these strong interests, it is often difficult to determine what his high preference reinforcers are, as they vary day to day, sometimes from morning to afternoon. Tommy has a great deal of difficulty with transitioning anywhere, from a treatment room to another setting, or occasionally even from instruction at the table to net on the floor, and frequently will engage in undesirable behavior during these times. When Tommy does have a successful transition between locations, he is reinforced with the use of the iPad. Tommy does exhibit many aggressive and interfering behaviors during the day, although they have been significantly reduced since beginning IBI at Lansdowne, where they were in the 600s or 700s per day. Aggressions include kicking, hitting, and headbutting. He is on a 10-minute DRO to manage his aggressions, which continue to be much lower than at his start, but are not currently consistent from day to day. When he is not aggressive toward others for 10 minutes, Tommy is reinforced with his highest reinforcer, going to the gym. According to Dr. Edward Gary Carr, in his chapter on sign language in Kogel and Rinkover's book, Educating and Understanding Autistic Children, the ability to respond yes or no appropriately is a basic language skill. Typically, developing children would already have developed this skill at a much earlier age. This skill is socially important to developing the ability to converse with others. The methods used in this intervention are ethically and socially acceptable by those involved in the program and to society. Initial ABLS assessment indicated deficits in most domains, particularly in labeling, interverbals, as well as all other domains from J to X. Tommy has mastered G1, labeling reinforcers, and G47, spontaneous labeling, and has had programming and met some targets in G2, 3, 13, 31, and 42, but has not mastered these according to the ABLS mastery criteria. His new program focus will be receptive identification under ABLS R domain G23, labels by indicating yes, no. The prerequisite skills Tommy has in cooperation and reinforcer effectiveness, receptive language, and labeling are all foundation for development of this new skill. These skill areas may also potentially be naturally increased as a part of this program. Baseline data was taken over 3 sessions by 2 instructor therapists. Tommy was unsuccessful in answering yes or no correctly for all targets on all 3 trials. An example of some of the known targets used in baseline are tree, red, dog, car, and ball. Training has been and will continue to occur both in intensive trial teaching, or ITT, and in natural environment teaching, NET. ITT takes place in a treatment room, with the instructor and child sitting at a table either side by side or across the table. NET may occur in various settings at the center. Teaching will be done in a treatment room so as to be free from distraction, and NET in various settings.
So, Nadine, you'll do ITT and NET. Because you have intensive trial teaching in the staff lounge, but then you also have NET, or natural environment, where he's in his classroom with his peers. So you're going to have a little bit of both. You're pretty much NET. You might have some intensive, but a lot of yours are going to be finding other ways to entertain. He needs to find other ways besides a TV to entertain himself. So a lot of his are going to be more natural, eating appropriately, not throwing a tantrum because he has to have it his way.
Things at the center. Teaching will be done in a treatment room so as to be free from distraction, and NET in various settings to help with generalization. Tommy will be shown a picture of the known item and asked the first question without any prompting. Upon answering correctly, he will then be given neutral descriptive praise and asked the second question, concurrently for both yes and no answers, with a full verbal prompt, interspersing with high probability questions as needed. Step 2 of the program will involve giving instruction 2 only, with prompting only as necessary. Prompting hierarchy will be from most to least, starting with a full verbal prompt, then partial verbal, both of which may involve saying, whispering, or mouthing the word, part of the word, or just its initial sound, and eventually moving toward independence, which involves no prompting. Of course, with this particular client, he often moves through programming quickly and may go from a full verbal prompt to no prompt within just a few sessions. Tommy's reinforcement schedule involves use of a token board. He is currently on a fixed ratio of 2, where he earns 2 tokens before receiving a self-selected reinforcer. He typically needs a preference assessment at the start of each session, as he does not have any items that are consistently reinforcing and not being used to assist with transitions or aggressive behavior. All independent correct responses during acquisition trials will be reinforced at a fixed ratio of 1 with a tangible. The instructor therapist will record the prompt level needed for each trial on a session note. This data will then be transferred onto a cold probe data sheet. The highest and most frequently needed prompt for each target at the last session will be recorded on the cold probe data sheet, and the instructor therapist will circle yes or no, indicating whether that was the last prompt level needed at the current trial. The prompt level needed for the current trial will then be marked in the next box for the next session. When there are 3 consecutive sessions at the independent level for a given answer, the item will then go into cold probe. Cold probes that are independently successful will be added to the cumulative target acquisition graph for that week. For this program, yes and no answers will both be tracked. Generalization in this program will incidentally be accomplished by training SD2 across multiple different items, concurrently for both yes and no answers. The actual generalization step will use actual items as opposed to pictures of items, common items in his environment at home with his parents and around the Lansdowne by novel instructor therapists. Maintenance will follow the same procedure as in generalization. Initially mastered targets will run for 3 correct consecutive days, then 3 correct consecutive weeks, and finally 3 correct consecutive months. There were a number of programs encountered in the implementation of this program which I'd like to address here. As mentioned earlier, Tommy's interfering and maladaptive behaviors can affect the number of trials that can be completed for any program, and of course this program was no different. Tommy's DRO for no aggressive behaviors is 10 minutes, and going to the gym is his most consistent, highly preferred reinforcer. This presents a problem due to his difficulties with transitions, which is exacerbated by his door-seeking behavior. This is all very time-consuming. Offering his most consistent second highest reinforcer, the iPad, is one potential solution. Another solution would be to work in a room closer to the gym, therefore reducing the number of doors he comes across during a transition. One method implemented toward the end of placement was to allow him to access a video of the squeaky door he most prefers, opening and closing several times in an attempt to satiate his door-seeking behavior. This has appeared to be moderately successful, but only time will tell. Another problem encountered is that Tommy is highly echoic and would often repeat back the item named in SD2. For example, when asked, "What is it?" he would answer, "Red, no," or "Red, yes." Or, when asked, "Is this red?" for a no question, even with the full verbal prompt, he would echo back red instead of no. One solution would be to skip giving this SD1. Another potential solution would be to incorporate the method in the NEAF 1984 article listed in my references and have him manned for a reinforcer as an SD1 and then give the SD2.